At the shopping center, a young boy named Ethan pointed to a wealthy businessman and said to his adoptive mother, "Hey, Mom, that guy looks just like me." She glanced up intrigued and was stunned by what she noticed. The mall was buzzing with holiday energy. Festive lights hung from railings. Cheerful music played over the speakers, and a massive Christmas tree stood in the center, covered in shiny decorations. The air was filled with the sense of cinnamon, pine, and freshly baked pretzels from the food court. Ethan's eyes sparkled with excitement as he soaked in the holiday spirit, his hand firmly holding his adoptive mom Lily's. Lily, mindful of their limited budget, carried a short list of necessities, none of which included the flashy toys Ethan kept eyeing in the store windows. She had promised him a cup of hot chocolate after their errands, hoping it would make up for the lack of big gifts this year. Ethan, with his curly dark hair and bright green eyes, looked up at Lily, his face full of joy. "Mom, can we see the big tree again before we go?" Lily smiled, her weariness fading for a moment. "Of course, sweetie. We'll stop by after the bookstore." As they walked past the crowd near the tree, a voice announced over the speakers, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Daniel Harper, founder of the Harper Foundation, here to talk about their holiday charity initiative." Lily paused, recognizing the name. Daniel Harper was a well-known figure, a tech mogul turned philanthropist, famous for his sharp style and immense wealth. She had read about his success but never expected to see him in person. She looked toward the stage where a tall, composed man in a tailored gray suit took the microphone. Ethan's gaze followed hers, his eyes narrowing as he studied the man. Daniel spoke confidently about helping children in need during the holidays. Ethan tugged on Lily's sleeve, his voice loud enough to draw attention. "Hey, Mom, that man looks just like me." Lily's heart skipped a beat. She crouched down to meet Ethan's curious eyes. "What do you mean, honey?" Ethan pointed at Daniel. "His face, Mom. He looks like me. Same nose, same eyebrows. Don't you see it?" Lily glanced back at the stage, her eyes darting between the billionaire and her son. She wanted to dismiss it as a child's imagination, but the resemblance was uncanny. Daniel's sharp features and piercing green eyes mirrored Ethan's in a way that made her stomach churn. Forcing a smile, Lily gently squeezed Ethan's shoulder. "It's just a coincidence, Ethan. Lots of people can look a little alike." "But it's not just a little," Ethan insisted, his voice rising. "Maybe he's my real dad." Lily's breath caught, and she quickly glanced around, noticing a few onlookers had overheard. Her cheeks flushed as she stood, gripping Ethan's hand tighter. "Ethan, let's go. We need to finish our shopping." "But Mom..." "Now, Ethan," Lily said firmly. Reluctantly, Ethan let her lead him away, though he kept turning to steal one last look at the man on stage. Daniel, focused on his speech, didn't seem to notice the boy's intense gaze. As they walked, Lily's mind raced. She had always been honest with Ethan about his adoption, though she knew little about his birth parents. His adoption had been closed, with only basic details about his biological mother, a young woman who couldn't care for a child, and nothing about his father. Lily had never pressed for more information, content to give Ethan all the love he needed. But now, his innocent observation had stirred something unexpected doubt. "Mom, are you mad at me?" Ethan asked quietly. Lily stopped and knelt down, cupping his face in her hands. "Of course not, sweetheart. I could never be mad at you. Then why did we have to leave? Don't you want to know if he's really my dad?" Lily hesitated, searching for the right words. "Ethan, just because someone looks like you doesn't mean they're your family. Families are about love, and you and I have plenty of that, don't we?" Ethan nodded, though his expression remained thoughtful. "Yeah, but what if he is? Wouldn't he want to know about me?" Lily's chest tightened. How could she explain such a complex situation to a child? She kissed his forehead and stood, taking his hand again. "Let's not worry about that right now, okay? Let's get you that hot chocolate I promised." Ethan didn't argue, though Lily could tell his mind was still spinning. As they headed to the food court, she couldn't help glancing back at the stage. Daniel was still there, smiling faintly as the crowd applauded. For a brief moment, his gaze swept over the crowd and landed in her direction. Lily quickly looked away, her heart racing as she hurried Ethan along. That night, as she tucked Ethan into bed, his words echoed in her mind. "That man looks just like me." The resemblance lingered, no matter how much she tried to dismiss it. It had to be a coincidence. But deep down, a small voice whispered, "What if it's not?" Later, as Lily sat in their quiet living room, the day's events replayed in her mind. The likeness between Ethan and Daniel haunted her. She told herself she was overthinking. Daniel was a man of wealth and power, worlds apart from their simple life. Yet, Ethan's innocent observation tugged at something she wasn't sure she wanted to explore. Down the hall, Ethan wasn't asleep. He lay in bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling, his mind filled with questions he couldn't yet put into words. Asterisk, who was his real family? Did he have siblings? Wyatt's mom seemed so uneasy when he pointed out the man who looked like him. Asterisk. The next morning, Ethan was unusually quiet at breakfast, barely touching his cereal. Lily watched him closely, sensing his mind was elsewhere. Normally, Ethan would chatter about his favorite superhero or a new story idea, but today he seemed distant. "Are you feeling okay?" Lily asked, breaking the silence. Ethan hesitated, poking at his cereal with his spoon. "Mom, do you know who my dad is?" Lily felt a lump in her throat. It wasn't the first time Ethan had asked about his biological parents, but his questions had always been easy to deflect, until now. She set down her coffee mug, choosing her words carefully. "Ethan, I've told you before. Your birth mom wasn't able to take care of you, so she made sure you'd have a good home. That's why I get to be your mom." "But what about my dad?" Ethan pressed. "Was he, gone or something?" Lily sighed, leaning forward to take his small hand in hers. "Sweetheart, I don't know much about your birth parents. I only know your mom loved you very much and wanted you to be safe." Ethan stared at her, his brow furrowed. "Do you think he's still out there?" "My dad? I don't know," Lily admitted softly, her voice trembling just enough for Ethan to notice. He nodded, though his expression remained serious. For the rest of the morning, Ethan seemed lost in thought, asking fewer questions, but wearing a pensive look Lily couldn't ignore. By evening, Lily was on edge. The truth was, she had avoided digging too deeply into Ethan's adoption story for a reason. She was afraid of what she might find. What if the answers led to more questions? What if they led to someone like Daniel Harper, a man who could turn their lives upside down? She felt selfish for wanting to keep the past buried, but the thought of losing the life they had built together made her chest tighten. That evening, while Ethan worked on a school assignment at the kitchen table, Lily opened the box she kept hidden in the back of her closet. Inside were all the documents from Ethan's adoption, forms, official letters, and a single photograph of his birth mother, a young woman with gentle eyes and a shy smile. Lily had examined that photo countless times over the years, searching for hints about the life Ethan might have come from. The paperwork revealed nothing about a father, no name or mention of his involvement. She closed the box with a heavy heart, unsure of what to do next. Across town, Daniel Harper sat alone in his spacious office, sipping a glass of whiskey as he stared out at the city skyline. The boy's face had been on his mind all day. He couldn't explain it, but there was something unsettlingly familiar about him. Daniel rarely noticed children in crowds. They were just background noise. But this boy was different. For a brief moment during his speech, Daniel's eyes had locked onto the boy's, and everything seemed to pause. It wasn't just the resemblance. There was something in the boy's gaze, a curiosity and intensity that mirrored his own. Shaking his head, Daniel took a sip of whiskey and muttered under his breath, "You're losing it, Harper. Too many late nights." He tried to focus on the paperwork in front of him, but the boy's face kept resurfacing in his mind. Against his better judgment, Daniel called the event coordinator and asked for photos from the charity event, a decision he immediately regretted. What was he even looking for? Proof of something he couldn't name? Back at home, Lily tucked Ethan into bed after reading his favorite story. As she smoothed his blankets, Ethan reached out and took her hand. "Mom, I don't want you to be sad," he said suddenly. Lily blinked, startled. "What makes you think I'm sad?" "You got that look today when I talked about the man who looks like me," Ethan said quietly. "Like you were scared." Lily's chest ached at his perceptiveness. She leaned down, brushing a curl from his forehead. "I'm not scared, Ethan. I just love you so much, and I don't want anything to change." "Why would it change?" he asked, his voice small. "It won't," Lily promised, though even as she said it, a part of her doubted. "I'll always be your mom. Nothing in the world could ever change that." Ethan seemed comforted by her words, but as he drifted off to sleep, Lily stayed by his bedside a little longer, her mind swirling with uncertainty. Meanwhile, Daniel sat at his desk, scrolling through photos of the charity event. His gaze caught on one image, a blurry shot of a boy in the crowd, looking directly at the camera. Daniel stared at it for a long moment, his heart beating faster than he wanted to admit. He closed his laptop with a sharp sigh, rubbing his temples. This was ridiculous. It was nothing. Yet, as he prepared to leave for the night, he couldn't shake the strange, gnawing feeling that the boy was connected to him in a way he didn't yet understand. For both Lily and Daniel, the seeds of curiosity had been planted, and there was no telling where they might grow. As the days passed, Lily couldn't shake the unease that had settled deep in her chest. Ethan continued to ask occasional questions about his birth parents, his curiosity clearly sparked by their encounter at the mall. He wasn't pushy, but his quiet, thoughtful nature made her worry even more. She had always tried to shield him from the uncertainties of his past, but now it seemed like those very uncertainties were determined to surface. Late one evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Lily sat alone at the kitchen table with the box of adoption papers in front of her. She hadn't opened it since their visit to the mall. Her hands hovered over the lid, hesitant, as if lifting it would somehow change everything. Taking a deep breath, she opened the box and began sorting through the documents. The official adoption certificate, the consent forms, the photo of Ethan's birth mother. She studied the woman's face, her soft eyes and shy smile. There was something achingly familiar about her expression, though Lily couldn't quite place why. The papers included a brief letter from the birth mother, a note thanking the adoptive parents for taking care of her child. There was no mention of a father, no clue as to his identity. But something about the birth mother's tone, a mixture of sorrow and urgency, suggested a story that hadn't been fully told. Lily's hand trembled as she reached for her phone. She hadn't contacted the adoption agency since Ethan had come into her life, but now she needed answers. The woman on the other end of the line was polite but firm, explaining that since it had been a closed adoption, only limited information could be shared. "I understand," Lily said, trying to master frustration. "But is there anything at all that might help me understand more about my son's background?" The woman hesitated. There are notes in the file indicating the birth mother was adamant about not naming the father, but there's an unusual detail here. She left a message with the agency that her child's father might someday want to know about the adoption. She didn't name him, but she said he was someone who wouldn't easily be forgotten. Lily's stomach dropped. "Do you know what she meant by that?" "No," the woman said gently. "It's vague, I know. I'm sorry we can't provide more information." After hanging up, Lily sat staring at her phone. Someone who wouldn't easily be forgotten. The phrase echoed in her mind, and she couldn't help but think of Daniel Harper. Her logical side told her she was being irrational. How could this powerful, untouchable man possibly be connected to her son? But her gut told her otherwise, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. That night she dreamed of Ethan standing hand in hand with Daniel, both of them looking at her with matching eyes. Across the city, Daniel was wrestling with his own questions. The image of the boy from the mall lingered in his thoughts, a nagging puzzle he couldn't ignore. He had always prided himself on his ability to compartmentalize, to focus solely on the tasks in front of him, but this was different. It felt personal, even though it shouldn't have been. Unable to sleep, Daniel went to his study and opened a box of his own, one filled with old photographs and mementos from a past he rarely allowed himself to revisit. Among the photos was one of her, the woman he had been with briefly more than 8 years ago. Her name was Emma, and their relationship had been fleeting, intense, and ultimately doomed by his ambition. Daniel traced a finger over the photograph, his chest tightening. He hadn't thought about Emma in years, but now her face was as vivid as ever. She had disappeared from his life abruptly, leaving behind nothing but memories and unanswered questions. The timing of their breakup, combined with the boy's age, planted a thought in his mind that he didn't want to entertain. Still, he couldn't let it go. The next morning, Daniel made a call. His assistant answered on the first ring. "Good morning, Mr. Harper. What can I do for you?" "I need you to find someone," Daniel said, his tone clipped. "Her name is Emma. I don't have much information, but she lived in the city about 9 years ago. Check everything, records, social media, whatever it takes." "Yes, sir. I'll get started immediately." Daniel ended the call and leaned back in his chair, staring at the photo in his hand. If the boy was connected to Emma, then he needed to know. He couldn't move forward without answers. For Lily, the weight of her own questions became too much to bear. After a long day at work, she found herself sitting in her car outside the mall, staring at the entrance where she had first seen Daniel Harper. Part of her wanted to let the matter drop, to protect Ethan from the storm that might come if Daniel was involved. But another part of her, the part that knew Ethan deserved the truth, pushed her forward. She stepped inside and approached the charity kiosk where Daniel had spoken days earlier. The event coordinator was still there, packing up the last remnants of the fundraiser. Lily hesitated, then asked, "Excuse me, do you know how I might contact Mr. Harper?" The coordinator gave her a curious look. "Mr. Harper doesn't give out personal information, but his foundation's office is in the city. You could try reaching out there." Lily thanked the woman and walked away, her heart racing. The decision she faced loomed larger with every passing moment. What would she even say to Daniel if she contacted him? How would she explain her suspicions without sounding like a lunatic? Later that evening, as Ethan worked on his homework at the table, Lily sat across from him, watching him intently. His green eyes, so bright and full of life, were focused on the math problems in front of him. Daniel's face flashed in her mind again, and the resemblance was almost too much to deny. "Mom," Ethan asked, breaking her train of thought, "why are you staring at me?" Lily forced a smile. "I'm just thinking about how smart you are. You make me so proud." Ethan grinned, but Lily's smile faded as soon as he looked away. She couldn't avoid it any longer. The truth, whatever it was waiting for her and for Ethan. Unbeknownst to her, Daniel was already taking steps to uncover the same truth. The threads of their lives, once distant, were beginning to intertwine in ways neither of them could have predicted. Daniel paced the length of his office, his mind racing. His assistant had reported back earlier in the day. Emma had been found. She had passed away years ago, but before her death, she had given birth to a boy. That boy, Daniel was now certain, was the one he had seen at the mall. The private investigator Daniel hired had worked quickly, connecting the pieces. The adoption records were sealed, but through painstaking research, the investigator confirmed the child's adoption by Lily. Daniel now had the proof he needed. Ethan was his son. He sat heavily in his chair, staring at the investigator's final report spread out on his desk. The boy's name, Ethan Carter. The papers detailed his adoption, the agency's involvement, and Emma's decision to give him up. Daniel's chest tightened as he read the words. The years he'd spent chasing wealth and success, the years he'd thought only of himself, had cost him the chance to know his own son. For the first time in years, Daniel felt truly unsure of what to do next. The rational, calculated part of his mind told him to tread carefully. He couldn't just barge into this child's life. But the father in him, the part he had never known existed, demanded action. Ethan deserved to know the truth, and so did Daniel. Across town, Lily was grappling with her own doubts. She had finally gathered the courage to reach out to Daniel Harper's foundation, leaving a carefully worded voicemail that she hoped wouldn't sound absurd. She hadn't expected a response, but to her surprise, Daniel's assistant called back the next day, setting up a meeting at his office. Lily was nervous as she prepared to meet Daniel, unsure of what to expect. She told herself this was for Ethan, that he deserved answers. Still, her heart was heavy with worry. What if Daniel wanted more than just answers? What if he wanted Ethan? When she arrived at the towering Harper Enterprises building, Lily was ushered into a sleek, modern office. The man she had seen on the stage at the mall stood by the window, his back to her, gazing out at the city skyline. Daniel turned as she entered, his sharp green eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the weight of the moment palpable. Daniel's expression softened as he gestured to a chair. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice calm but laced with emotion. Lily sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I wasn't sure if I should come, but Ethan has been asking questions, and I couldn't ignore them anymore." Daniel nodded, sitting across from her. "I appreciate your honesty. I won't waste your time. I've been looking into this. I believe Ethan is my son." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Lily's breath caught, and she clenched her fist to steady herself. "If that's true, why now? Why didn't you look for him sooner?" Daniel hesitated, guilt flashing across his face. "I didn't know he existed. Emma, she never told me. We had a complicated relationship, and when it ended, she disappeared. I thought it was just another chapter of my life. I didn't realize that she'd been pregnant." Lily studied him, searching for any sign of dishonesty. She saw none. "Ethan is my son," she said firmly. "I've raised him since he was a baby. I won't let anyone take him from me." Daniel's gaze softened. "I'm not here to take him away. I can see how much you love him, how well you've cared for him. I would never want to disrupt his life. But I do want to be part of it, if you'll let me." Lily's defenses wavered, though her mistrust lingered. "Why should I believe that? You're a powerful man. You could do whatever you wanted." Daniel leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "Because I know what it feels like to grow up without a father. My dad left when I was young, and I promised myself I'd never make the same mistakes. And yet, here I am, finding out I've already missed 8 years of my son's life." His sincerity took Lily by surprise. She looked away, her emotions warring within her. She wanted to protect Ethan from the chaos this revelation could bring, but a part of her also wanted to give him the answers he sought. "What do you expect to happen?" she asked finally. "You show up, and suddenly Ethan has 2 parents? It's not that simple." "I know it's not," Daniel admitted. "I'm not asking for anything immediate or dramatic. I just want to meet him, to see if there's a way to build something. I'll follow your lead, Lily. But please, don't shut me out without giving me a chance." Lily studied him again, this time seeing the vulnerability beneath the polished exterior. She thought of Ethan, of his endless questions and the way he had looked at Daniel that day in the mall. Would denying this man the opportunity to know his son truly be in Ethan's best interest? "I need time to think," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "This isn't just about you or me. It's about what's best for Ethan." Daniel nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." Lily stood, her hands trembling slightly. As she left the office, her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She had come seeking answers, but now that she had them, the path forward felt more uncertain than ever. Back in his office, Daniel stared out the window once more, his mind filled with images of the boy he had yet to meet. He knew Lily's hesitations were justified, and he respected her for it. But he also knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let this chance slip away. He owed it to Ethan and to himself to try. Lily spent the next week in a haze of indecision. Her conversation with Daniel had left her reeling. She couldn't stop replaying his words, his sincerity, and the way he had admitted his regrets. She could see how deeply he wanted to connect with Ethan, but she also couldn't ignore the risks. Introducing Daniel into Ethan's life could bring complications she wasn't sure either of them was ready for. But Ethan, as always, had a way of tipping the scales. It started with his questions, which hadn't stopped. "Mom, did you talk to him?" The man from the mall, he asked one evening as they worked on a puzzle together. His tone was casual, but Lily could see the hope in his eyes. "I did," she said honestly, her hands pausing over the puzzle pieces. "We talked about you." Ethan's face lit up. "Really? What did he say?" Lily hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "He thinks he might be your dad, Ethan, but we're taking things slowly. I want to make sure this is the right thing for you." Ethan's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and excitement flashing across his face. "Does that mean I'll get to meet him?" Lily smiled faintly, brushing a curl from his forehead. "Maybe, but only if you're ready." Ethan nodded eagerly. "I'm ready, Mom. I want to meet him." And so, a few days later, they met at a quiet park near Lily's neighborhood. She had chosen a location carefully, somewhere open and public, but not crowded, a place where Ethan could feel comfortable. Daniel arrived early, dressed more casually than Lily had ever seen him, his usually sharp suit replaced with a simple sweater and jeans. Brian looked almost nervous, a stark contrast to the confident man Lily had met in his office. When Ethan spotted Daniel sitting on a bench, he hesitated for a moment, clutching Lily's hand. "Is that him?" he whispered. "That's him," Lily said softly. "You can go say hi if you want." Ethan let go of her hand and approached Daniel, his steps tentative but determined. Daniel stood as Ethan came closer, his expression softening as he knelt to meet the boy at eye level. "Hi, Ethan," Daniel said, his voice warm but unsure. "I'm Daniel." Ethan studied him for a moment, his green eyes wide with curiosity. "Hi, you're really tall." Daniel chuckled, a sound that surprised even him. "Yeah, I guess I am, but I bet you're fast." "Are you faster than me?" Ethan grinned. "Probably. Want to race?" Daniel glanced at Lily, who stood a few feet away, watching with a mixture of caution and hope. She gave a small nod, and Daniel turned back to Ethan. "All right, let's see what you've got." The two of them took off down the path, Ethan's laughter ringing out as Daniel pretended to stumble and lose. Lily watched them, her heart tight with emotion. She had worried that the meeting would be awkward or overwhelming. But Ethan had a way of breaking through walls, even ones Daniel seemed to have built around himself. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and Ethan met a handful of times, always in casual, low-pressure settings. Lily insisted on being present for each meeting, her protective instincts still in full force. But as she watched them interact, she began to see something she hadn't expected: joy. Ethan lit up around Daniel, his natural curiosity and boundless energy drawing Daniel out of his reserved shell. For Daniel, each meeting felt like discovering a part of himself he hadn't known was missing. Ethan's curiosity reminded him of his own relentless drive to learn as a child, and his stubborn streak was both frustrating and endearing. But what struck Daniel most was Ethan's compassion, the way he picked up on Daniel's hesitations and tried to make him laugh, or how he always wanted to share stories about his life with Lily. One afternoon, as they sat on a picnic blanket in the park, Ethan turned to Daniel with a serious expression. "Do you have a lot of money?" he asked. Lily stiffened, ready to intervene, but Daniel smiled. "I do, yeah." Ethan tilted his head. "Do you buy a lot of stuff with it?" Daniel paused, considering the question. "I used to, but I've learned that the best things in life aren't things you can buy." Ethan frowned thoughtfully. "Like what?" "Like time," Daniel said. "Time with people who matter." Ethan seemed satisfied with that answer, But Lily felt her chest tighten. She saw the way Daniel looked at Ethan, how his words weren't just for the boy, but a reflection of his own regrets. That evening, after Daniel left, Lily tucked Ethan into bed and sat on the edge of his mattress. "Did you have fun today?" she asked. "Yeah," Ethan said with a sleepy smile. "Daniel's really cool. I think he's like me. Do you think he likes dinosaurs too?" Lily laughed softly. "Maybe. You can ask him next time." Ethan yawned and closed his eyes, but before drifting off he whispered, "I like when he's around." Lily sat with him until his breathing evened out, her thoughts heavy. She couldn't deny the bond forming between Daniel and Ethan, and she had to admit it wasn't as frightening as she'd expected. She had always worried that letting Ethan know his biological roots would somehow diminish their bond, but instead, it seemed to make him more whole. For Daniel, these moments with Ethan were transformative. He began to see his life in a new light. The towering office building, the luxury cars, the accolades, they all felt hollow compared to the simple joy of hearing Ethan laugh or seeing him light up over a shared joke. He had spent years chasing success, convinced it would fill the emptiness left by his father's absence. But now, he realized that what he truly needed had been missing all along. One evening, as he sat in his penthouse apartment, staring out at the city, Daniel made a decision. He didn't just want to be a part of Ethan's life. He wanted to be someone Ethan could rely on, someone who could be proud of the choices he made. And for that, he knew changes had to be made. The bridge between Daniel and Ethan was still being built, but each step felt more certain than the last. Lily, though still cautious, couldn't help but feel that something extraordinary was beginning to unfold, a connection that had been waiting for its moment to emerge, and a family redefining itself in the most unexpected way. Daniel's days with Ethan had become a bright spot in his life, something he eagerly looked forward to. The boy's boundless energy and curiosity reminded Daniel of simpler, purer times before his life had become consumed by power and ambition. For the first time in years, he found himself reconsidering what truly mattered, and Ethan was at the center of it. Lily had begun to lower her guard, watching the relationship between Daniel and Ethan grow. While she still kept a careful eye on their interactions, she couldn't deny the joy Ethan felt in having Daniel in his life. It was something she hadn't realized her son needed until she saw the change in him, a lightness, a sense of wholeness that hadn't been there before. But life has a way of complicating happiness. One crisp autumn morning, Lily's phone buzzed incessantly on the kitchen counter. She frowned at the unfamiliar number before answering. The voice on the other end was curt and professional. "Ms. Carter, I'm calling to inform you that a story involving your son and Mr. Daniel Harper is set to run in tomorrow's paper. I thought you should know before it breaks." Lily froze, her heart pounding. "What kind of story?" The reporter hesitated. "It's about Ethan being Daniel Harper's son. There's been some digging into Mr. Harper's past, and well, someone leaked details about your son's adoption." The words hit Lily like a physical blow. "Who would? I can't say. I just thought you deserved a heads up," the reporter said before hanging up. Lily stared at her phone, dread building in her chest. She barely had time to process the call before the first knock came at her door. Peeking through the window, she saw a cluster of reporters gathered on her front lawn, cameras flashing and microphones thrust forward. "Ms. Carter, is it true your son is Daniel Harper's illegitimate child? How long have you been hiding this from the public? Does Mr. Harper plan to claim custody?" The questions came rapid fire, muffled through the door but loud enough to make Ethan, who had been in the living room, come running. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, his voice tinged with fear. Lily forced a calm she didn't feel, ushering him away from the windows. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Just some people asking questions they shouldn't be asking." Ethan frowned but didn't argue, his trust in her evident. Lily's mind raced as she locked the doors and drew the curtains. She grabbed her phone and dialed Daniel's number, her hands trembling. He answered on the second ring, his voice filled with concern. "Lily, are you okay?" No, Daniel, I'm not okay, she snapped, her voice shaking. There are reporters on my lawn, asking about Ethan. Someone leaked his adoption, our connection, to the media. Daniel's sharp intake of breath on the other and told her he hadn't known. Lily, I swear I had nothing to do with this. I would never. Then who did? She interrupted. Because someone did, Daniel, and now my son is in the middle of a scandal he doesn't understand. I'll handle it, Daniel said firmly. I'll find out who's responsible and make this go away. Lily let out a bitter laugh. You can't make this go away, Daniel. It's already out there. My son's life, my life, is being turned upside down because of you. Daniel's silence was heavy, the weight of her accusation clear. Lily, please let me fix this. I don't think you can, she said quietly before hanging up. For the next few days, life became a blur of chaos. Lily refused to let Ethan go to school, fearing the media would follow him there. The phone rang incessantly with calls from journalists and strangers offering opinions on her parenting or demands for more information. Even trips to the grocery store became impossible without being hounded. Ethan, usually so cheerful and resilient, withdrew into himself. He stopped asking about Daniel, instead spending hours in his room with his books and toys. One evening, Lily found Ethan sitting on his bed, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. Ethan, she said gently, sitting beside him. What's wrong, sweetheart? He looked up at her, his green eyes filled with confusion and hurt. Did Daniel tell them? The people outside? No, Lily said quickly, pulling him into her arms. Daniel didn't do this. Someone else did, but I promise you it wasn't him. Ethan buried his face in her shoulder. Then why is this happening? I thought Daniel cared about us. He does, Lily said, stroking his hair. But sometimes, when people know someone famous like Daniel, they look for ways to hurt them. This isn't your fault, Ethan, and it's not Daniel's either. But even as she said the words, her anger at Daniel lingered. Whether or not he was directly responsible, this chaos was a result of his presence in their lives. She couldn't ignore the damage it was causing, not just to Ethan, but to their entire sense of safety and stability. When Daniel called again, Lily didn't answer. He sent messages, apologizing profusely and asking to see Ethan, but she couldn't bring herself to respond. It wasn't until he showed up at her doorstep one evening, looking worn and desperate, that she finally confronted him. Daniel, what are you doing here? She demanded, stepping outside to keep Ethan from overhearing. I needed to see you, he said, his voice quiet but urgent. I've been working non-stop to contain this, Lily. I've hired the best PR team, lawyers, everything. I'm doing everything I can to protect you and Ethan. Protect us, she scoffed. The damage is already done, Daniel. Ethan is scared, confused, and he doesn't understand why his life has suddenly become a headline. Daniel's face crumpled. I never wanted this for him, for either of you. I'm so sorry, Lily. I swear, if I could take it all back, I would. But you can't, she said, her voice trembling with anger. This isn't just about you, Daniel. It's about Ethan. He's my son, and I need to do what's best for him. Right now. That means keeping him as far away from you as possible. Daniel flinched as if she had struck him. Please, don't do this. Ethan deserves to know me, to have me in his life. And he deserves a normal life, Lily shot back, which he'll never have if you're in it. Daniel's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. If that's what you really think is best, I'll respect your decision. But please, tell him I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Lily nodded tightly, tears stinging her eyes. She watched as Daniel walked away, his usually confident stride replaced by a defeated shuffle. For a moment, she wanted to call him back, to tell him she didn't really mean it. But then she thought of Ethan and the turmoil he had endured. Closing the door, Lily leaned against it, her heart heavy with the weight of her choice. She hoped she was doing the right thing, but doubt lingered, an unwelcome companion in the silence that followed. The days after Daniel left were quiet, but not in the way Lily had hoped. The reporters eventually thinned out. The news cycle moved on, and their lives began to return to some semblance of normalcy. But the rift left in its wake wasn't so easily mended. Ethan remained subdued, spending more time alone in his room. He didn't ask about Daniel anymore, but Lily could tell he was holding back. She saw it in the way he hesitated before speaking, as if there were questions he was afraid to ask. She hated the uncertainty he carried, the confusion she couldn't entirely shield him from. One evening, as she tucked him into bed, he looked up at her with those wide, searching eyes that always pierced her heart. "Mom, is Daniel ever coming back?" Lily froze, the weight of his question pressing down on her. She sat beside him, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "I don't know, sweetheart. Daniel cares about you. But sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices to keep the people they love safe." Ethan frowned, his small hands clutching the blanket. "I didn't want him to leave." "I know," Lily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't want to hurt you, Ethan. I'm just trying to do what's best." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, then said, "What if I wrote to him? Would that be okay?" Lily's chest tightened. She hadn't expected this, but she could see how much it mattered to him. "If that's what you want to do, of course it's okay." Ethan nodded, his expression resolute. "I'll write him tomorrow." The next day, Ethan spent hours at the kitchen table, carefully crafting his letter. Lily didn't interfere, though she couldn't stop herself from peeking occasionally, her heart aching at the sight of her son pouring his feelings onto the page. When he was finished, Ethan handed the letter to Lily, his eyes brimming with hope. "Can you send it to him?" Lily took the letter and nodded, though her emotions swirled with doubt and apprehension. That night, as Ethan slept, she read the letter. It was simple, heartfelt, and utterly unguarded in the way only a child's words could be. "Dear Daniel, I miss you. I didn't want you to go. I know the people outside were mean, but I know it wasn't your fault. I want to see you again. Can we still be friends? Love, Ethan, *. Lily's hands trembled as she folded the letter back into its envelope. She couldn't ignore the plea in her son's words, and she knew she owed him the chance to see where it might lead. The next morning, she made the call. Daniel's voice was tentative when he answered, a mix of surprise and hope. "Lily, I'm calling for Ethan," she said, trying to keep her tone neutral. "He wrote you a letter. He wants to see you." There was a pause. Then Daniel spoke, his voice full of emotion. "I'd like that. Tell me when and where." 2 days later, they met at the same park where Daniel had first raced Ethan down the path. This time, Daniel arrived early again, but his usual polished demeanor was gone. He looked tired, his face etched with a vulnerability Lily hadn't seen before. When Ethan spotted Daniel, his face lit up, and he ran toward him without hesitation. Daniel knelt to catch him in a hug, his arms wrapping around the boy as if he never wanted to let go. "I miss you too, buddy," Daniel said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Lily watched from a distance, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She wasn't ready to let her guard down completely, but seeing Ethan so happy melted some of the walls she had built. After a few moments, Daniel approached her with Ethan at his side. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving me this chance." Lily nodded, her voice hesitant but genuine. "Ethan deserves answers. And maybe you deserve another chance too." They spent the afternoon together, the tension slowly easing as they talked and laughed. Daniel brought a small journal for Ethan, explaining it was for him to write down all the things he wanted to share, questions, stories, anything at all. Ethan accepted it eagerly, already flipping through the blank pages with excitement. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Lily pulled Daniel aside. "I need to know one thing," she said. "What are your intentions here? What do you really want?" Daniel's gaze was steady, his voice firm. "I want to be a part of Ethan's life, but only in the way that's best for him. I'm not here to disrupt what you've built, Lily. You're his mother, and you've done an incredible job. I'll follow your lead." Lily studied him for a long moment before nodding. If we're going to do this, it has to be about Ethan, his happiness, his well-being. Nothing else. Agreed, Daniel said, his tone resolute. As they rejoined Ethan, who was busy sketching in his new journal, Lily felt a cautious sense of hope. For all the turmoil and uncertainty, there was a chance, just a chance, that they could make this work. That evening, as they said their goodbyes, Ethan hugged Daniel tightly. "Can we do this again soon?" he asked. Daniel smiled, his eyes glistening. "Whenever you want, buddy." For the first time in weeks, Lily felt a flicker of peace. It wouldn't be easy and there would be challenges ahead, but for Ethan's sake, she was willing to try. The weeks that followed marked a cautious but steady rebuilding of trust. Daniel became a presence in Ethan's life again, careful to tread lightly and respect Lily's boundaries. Their meetings remained simple: walks in the park, shared afternoons at the library, or quiet dinners at Lily's home. Daniel took every opportunity to prove that his promises weren't empty, and slowly, Lily found herself believing him. By the time the holidays approached, Ethan was buzzing with excitement. He'd spent weeks scribbling letters to Santa, drawing snowmen on every scrap of paper he could find, and asking a million questions about how they'd celebrate. For the first time, Lily considered doing something different, something that reflected the changes in their little family. When Ethan brought up the idea of inviting Daniel to spend Christmas Eve with them, Lily hesitated at first. But the hope in Ethan's eyes was impossible to resist. So one evening, as they were cleaning up after dinner, Lily turned to Daniel. "Ethan was wondering if you'd like to join us for Christmas Eve," she said, her voice steady but soft. "If you don't have other plans." Daniel looked up, clearly taken aback. "I'd love to," he said after a beat. "Thank you, Lily." On Christmas Eve, snow blanketed the city, turning the streets into a sparkling winter wonderland. Lily's home was modest but warm, with the scent of cinnamon and pie filling the air. Ethan had insisted on decorating every corner of the house, and his enthusiasm showed in the garlands strung haphazardly along the walls and the slightly crooked star atop the tree. Daniel arrived just as the sun set, carrying a carefully wrapped gift under one arm and a plate of cookies in the other. Ethan ran to greet him, beaming as he pulled Daniel inside. "You're just in time," Ethan said, dragging him toward the tree. "We're about to watch Christmas movies." Daniel chuckled, setting the gift and cookies on the table. "Sounds perfect. What's first on the list?" Ethan launched into an animated explanation, while Lily watched from the kitchen, a soft smile playing on her lips. It was surreal, seeing the three of them together like this. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of completeness she hadn't realized was missing. Later that evening, as they sat around the glowing tree, Ethan tore into his presence with the kind of unbridled joy only a child could muster. He gasped when he opened the gift from Daniel, a beautiful leather-bound journal, embossed with his name on the cover. "This is so cool," Ethan exclaimed, running his fingers over the smooth pages. "What's it for?" "It's for you to write down anything you want," Daniel explained, his tone gentle. "Stories, drawings, questions, whatever comes to mind. It's your way of keeping track of all the amazing things you do." Ethan hugged the journal tightly, his smile wide. "Thank you, Daniel. It's the best gift ever." As Ethan dove into another gift, Lily and Daniel exchanged a glance from across the room. She nodded slightly, her way of acknowledging the thoughtfulness of his gesture. When Ethan finally fell asleep on the couch, a half-eaten cookie in hand, Lily and Daniel moved to the kitchen to clean up. The quiet hum of Christmas music filled the space as they worked side by side, a comfortable rhythm settling between them. "Thank you for inviting me," Daniel said after a while, his voice low. "I know it wasn't easy for you to take this step." Lily paused, drying a plate with a dish towel. "It wasn't," she admitted, "but it was the right thing to do. Ethan loves having you in his life, and I think it's good for him, for both of you." Daniel set down the cup he was drying and turned to her, his expression earnest. "I want you to know that I'll always respect your role as his mother. You've done an incredible job raising him, Lily. I'll follow your lead, whatever that looks like. She met his gaze, her defenses lowering even further. I think we're figuring it out, she said softly, one step at a time. Daniel nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. One step at a time. When the kitchen was clean, they returned to the living room, where Ethan had stirred awake and was busy sketching in his new journal. Lily and Daniel sat nearby, watching as he carefully drew 3 figures under a bright yellow sun, a boy, a woman, and a man. Above them, in his wobbly handwriting, Ethan wrote me, Mom, and Daniel, my dad. Lily's breath caught, and she glanced at Daniel, whose eyes glistened with emotion as he looked at the drawing. Neither of them said anything, but in that moment, words weren't needed. The picture said it all. A family, unconventional but real, bound by love and the unspoken promise to always put Ethan first. As the evening wore on and the snow continued to fall outside, Lily felt the warmth she hadn't expected, a quiet certainty that they were moving towards something better. It wouldn't always be easy, but for Ethan, they would make it work together. The weeks after Christmas marked a quiet but steady evolution in their lives. The new year brought opportunities for Daniel, Lily, and Ethan to deepen their connection, though not without challenges. They found themselves navigating what it meant to function as a unique kind of family. Daniel, true to his word, prioritized Ethan's happiness above all else. He scaled back his public appearances, opting to work more behind the scenes in his company. For the first time in years, he let his assistant handle the constant demands for his time. Instead, he spent weekends taking Ethan on small adventures, visits to the museum, hours at the science center, or even simple walks in the park. Ethan thrived under this new attention. His natural curiosity and love of learning flourished as Daniel introduced him to new experiences. Lily noticed how Ethan had become more confident, his excitement infectious as he shared stories about his time with Daniel. One chilly Saturday morning, Daniel picked Ethan up for a surprise outing. Ethan climbed into the car, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Where are we going?" he asked. "You'll see," Daniel said with a mysterious smile. The surprise turned out to be a visit to a local aviary. Ethan's eyes widened as they walked through the vast domes filled with exotic birds of every color imaginable. Daniel watched as Ethan darted from exhibit to exhibit, peppering the guides with questions about habitats and diets. It was a side of his son he cherished, this unfiltered enthusiasm, this eagerness to absorb the world around him. At one point, Daniel crouched down beside Ethan as they watched a peacock fan its brilliant feathers. "You know," Daniel said, "when I was your age, I wanted to be a scientist. I loved learning about animals." Ethan turned to him, wide-eyed. "You did? Why didn't you become one?" Daniel smiled wistfully. "Life took me in a different direction. But watching you, I feel like I get to live that dream a little bit through you." Ethan grinned. "Maybe I'll be a scientist someday, and you can help me." "I'd like that," Daniel said softly, his heart full. For Lily, seeing this side of Daniel was both comforting and bittersweet. She had spent so many years protecting Ethan from the uncertainties of his past. Yet here Daniel was, showing her that perhaps she didn't have to do it all alone. She found herself sharing more about Ethan's life with Daniel, opening up in ways she hadn't expected. One evening, as Ethan worked on his homework at the dining table, Daniel stayed for dinner. It was a simple meal, spaghetti and garlic bread, but the atmosphere was warm and easy. As they laughed over Ethan's recounting of his latest school project, Lily realized how natural it felt to have Daniel there. The guarded tension that had once defined their interactions had been replaced by something far more comfortable: trust. Later, after Ethan had gone to bed, Daniel lingered in the living room. He hesitated before speaking, his tone uncharacteristically uncertain. "Lily, I know this arrangement hasn't been easy for you. I just want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for Ethan and for giving me this chance." Lily looked at him, her expression softening. "I'll admit, I wasn't sure we could make this work, but seeing Ethan so happy, it's worth it." He loves having you in his life." Daniel nodded, his gratitude evident. "I love being in his life, and I want you to know, whatever you need, I'm here for you too." For the first time, Lily let herself believe him completely. As the months passed, they continued to build on their newfound partnership. Daniel made a point of including Lily in every decision involving Ethan, from small things like extracurricular activities to bigger questions about his education. Lily appreciated Daniel's respect for her role as Ethan's mother, and in turn, she encouraged Ethan to embrace the bond he was forming with Daniel. One spring evening, Ethan presented Lily and Daniel with something he had been working on in his journal. It was a story about a boy who went on adventures with his parents, discovering new worlds and learning about the stars. At the end of the story, the boy drew a constellation in the shape of a heart, connecting his family with an unbreakable bond. As they sat together reading the story, Ethan looked up at both of them, his smile shy but proud. "I made it for us," he said. Lily blinked back tears while Daniel's throat tightened. "It's beautiful, Ethan," Daniel said, pulling him into a hug. "Just like you." That night, as Lily and Daniel stood in the doorway of Ethan's room, watching him sleep, Lily spoke softly. "He's lucky to have you." Daniel shook his head. "No, Lily, I'm the lucky one." In the quiet of that moment, they both realized how far they had come, not just as individuals, but as a family. They weren't perfect, and there would still be challenges ahead, but they were united by something stronger than circumstance: love and a commitment to give Ethan the life he deserved. Together, they were building a new beginning, one step at a time. As the snow settles and the lights dim on this chapter of Ethan, Lily, and Daniel's journey, we're reminded that family isn't just about shared blood. It's about love, understanding, and the courage to grow together. Through heartache, hope, and hard-earned trust, they found a way to redefine what family means, proving that even the most unexpected connections can form the strongest bonds. If you enjoyed this story of resilience, love, and new beginnings, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another heartwarming tale. What do you think makes a family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, thank you for watching, and remember, every story has the power to inspire. See you in the next video.